Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties from the Michigan Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, the podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. We have our full group of government affairs staff. Samantha Gibson, Jimmy Johnson, Deena Bosworth are all here this week. So we're going to kind of do a recap. It's been a couple weeks since we've done a quote unquote live podcast. But how was everyone's weekend? Some major storms came through last week. Everyone survive all right?
Just got my power back earlier today, so I'm a happy camper.
Yeah, that was Friday, so that was a real eventful weekend for you, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Deena, any issues at your place?
No issues at my place. I
Sam?
mean, other than kids waking me up to the tornado warnings, but other than that, no.
Sam, how about you?
I was fine, and I feel bad because Jimmy's my neighbor, and I never lost power.
Clean living, Sam, clean living. That's what it is.
Yeah, there's got to be something like that.
Yeah.
Did you have any damage in your neighborhood, Steve?
Yeah, I had a big branch come in my driveway I had to cut up, and then I had a broken pipe that was unrelated to the storm, but by happenstance, some basement issues there. So
Oh,
just
no.
old house stuff there, but nothing major. No, we didn't have a lot of issues in our neighborhood, so that was good. So let's get started. All right. So not only did we have storms that came through Thursday night into Friday, but we had a financial storm come through on Friday. See what I did there, guys? This consensus revenue estimating conference met on Friday, and fill me in. What happened? What are we looking at as far as our budget? This is the conference that gives the chambers kind of some early targets, I guess you could say, for what they have to work with for the upcoming budget that's technically due October 1st, should be due July 1st, but we're not expecting that. So what did we hear? Who wants to start?
Well, I think, the May Revenue Estimating Conference had us, state revenue forecast general fund down by about 331 million. Is that right, everybody? Nod your head if I'm right. I think it's $331 million from what they anticipated earlier this year. That means the Senate budget's off a little bit, or maybe it's down 370 and the Senate budgets are off by 331. Double check my numbers. But either way, we're talking like 300 million plus almost $400 million in less revenue than they originally anticipated. And I think this speaks to sort of the budget dynamics in Lansing right now, where the Senate has passed out their version of budgets, and the House is waiting, and they wanted to wait until this May consensus revenue estimating conference because they didn't know really how much money they have to work with. And so they're kind of playing it close to the chest right now. Plus, I think we have to wait and see what happens at the federal level on Medicaid cuts and other potential cuts coming down to the state. So it makes for a strange budget year.
Yeah, and this didn't necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, did this take into account variability at the federal level, or maybe some of the variability at the federal level, but not all when you're talking Medicaid cuts? I don't think that was included in this, was it? Jimmy, do you know?
I do not on that one, no.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily took into account the Medicaid cuts because I don't think those are fully fleshed out at the federal level. So it could be even more of a shortfall or less money than what we are anticipating, and than what they even came out with. Which leads us to, what some legislators have suggested is a potential another crack at some point in time this year. As we kind of started saying, the budget's typically done July 1st, but doesn't have to really be done till October 1st. We're in May. Let's talk a little bit about budget. We've got a Senate budget that's been passed out, right? Let's talk a little bit about that first. We're going a lot of different directions. Let's talk about the Senate budget. Highlight some of the things in the Senate budget that were passed out.
Okay. All right. So the Senate is operating on a similar timeline as every other fiscal year, in that they want to get the budgets done and out and shoot for a July 1 deadline to have them on the governor's desk. And that's not necessarily for us. I mean, our members have different fiscal years, but schools' fiscal year, they have to have all their budgets done in the summer. And so if the legislature doesn't act immediately to give them some idea on what their funding is, then they're looking at all kinds of implementation problems when school starts in the fall. So the Senate's operating on that timeline still. And for us, what the Senate has taken up and what the Senate has passed out looks really good. I'm going to highlight the general government budget because that's the one that I'm in the most, but that's where our revenue sharing dollars are. This year they put in money for crime prevention in the Senate budget. So it's different, very similar, but different than the policy bills on public safety. This one is crime prevention. So those two items, number one, there's recommended a $29 million increase in county revenue sharing, which is awesome. That is based on 10% increase from what we got in the previous fiscal year. They've also included $60 million to go out to each county for crime prevention in whatever initiatives they want to see. So it could be use that funding for your sheriff's department, use it for your prosecutors, use it for mental health services, use it for anything that you think is going to be, productive in crime prevention. And so that to MAC is a great sign because it's not restricted funds and each county can prioritize what they want to use it for. One more item in the Senate general government budget that was added last Thursday on the Senate floor, which you don't normally see amendments added on the floor, was a $100 placeholder for county monies so that they can have the state pick up the tab for those retroactive excess proceeds that we kept from foreclosures. So think back a few years ago, we did a lot of restructuring of how tax foreclosures are handled in Michigan, and property owners were entitled to some of those excess proceeds. Well, subsequent court decisions have said this can be retroactive, and it needs to be retroactive so that now people can come and claim those excess proceeds from the county. Problem is this: counties were following the law. Counties were going through these foreclosure processes, and if there were excess proceeds, maybe they helped out their land bank, maybe it went to their general fund, whatever it was, we were allowed to utilize those funds. And the courts have said those residents have a right to those excess proceeds. So now we're in the process of those people coming forward and saying, hey, I want the excess proceeds from my tax foreclosure on my house. And that's going to be a big chunk of change coming out of county budgets. The estimates are somewhere around $83 million. So the Senate recognized that. Senator Lindsay led the charge, Senator John Cherry, Senator Chang, Senator Anthony. They all said, you know what, you're absolutely right. Let's figure out how we can get some money in this budget. So by putting a $100 placeholder in it, that's going to open that up for negotiations with the House as the budget moves forward throughout the process. It's not the whole $83 million that we think we're going to need, but at least it keeps that discussion going. So, big kudos out to Senator Lindsay, Senator Cherry for championing that for us.
Yeah, I think, Sam, there was another, not necessarily in general government, but another new budget item you wanted to talk about too, in the Senate side.
Yes, thank you, Steve. So there's a Supreme Court decision at the end of April that extended to 19 and 21-year-olds as it relates to juvenile life without parole sentences. So now counties who were housed the convicting court for 19 and 21-year-olds, 19 and 20-year-olds that were sentenced to mandatory life without parole are going to need funding to go through the resentencing process that will fall on the prosecutor's office within the convicting court. And so MAC and the Prosecuting Attorneys Association were partnered in asking for $10 million to assist those counties that are going to have to do this resentencing process. And that $10 million will be distributed on a caseload basis. So just however many cases you have will determine how much of that $10 million you'll need. And we're hopeful and I think fairly confident that we'll see this funding in the FY26 budget.
Yeah, so a lot of we'll call them positive asks in the Senate side. You've got the House, who hasn't done a budget yet, but has passed a road funding package that's does some appropriating of general fund dollars, and now you have a CREC estimate that's reduced. At some point in time, the math doesn't work out, and I guess we'll wait and see and figure out when that math doesn't work out and figure out what priorities are going to be in or need to be prioritized, because there seems to be a lot of moving parts there. That's why I think you're starting to hear legislators talk about another CREC later in the year to see where federal changes come in. How do they impact Michigan? What sort of priorities do they need to reallocate resources to based on those decisions made at the federal level? And then you got a budget that we need to have it done by October 1st. Schools being a different animal in itself as well. So let's move on a little bit, unless anyone else had anything they wanted to say more on the budget side of things. No, nothing. Okay. Jimmy, can you update us on the PIHP issue? I know a lot of counties have passed resolutions. CMHs have been passing resolutions on this issue. Can you give us a little update on that?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So the PIHPs, for people that aren't familiar with that, that's a prepaid inpatient health plan. So these are regional entities in Michigan. There's currently 10 of them, and they're responsible for managing and coordinating Medicaid-funded behavioral health services. So this would be mental health treatment, individuals with developmental disabilities, and substance use disorder treatment. This was created in 1997, and what this does, it creates a more publicly managed health system with input from the locals, and it makes it so each community is getting treatment tailored to the specific needs of their community. So again, this has been in place since 1997, so we're going on 30 years. Within the last few months, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services put out a release asking for comment from people. They want to get public input because they are looking at potentially doing a bidding process for the PIHPs. So we have, a lot of concerns that are going to be going with that. In particular, is the privatization of the mental health system. The way that MDHHS is proposing to bid out these PIHP contracts, this could potentially transfer the management to private, for-profit or nonprofit health plans. So by doing that, again, we're taking away local control, local input on these very specific health cases. Without that direct role of managing the Medicaid mental health dollars, again, this just weakens the link that we're going to have between the services in our counties and the people that they serve. And by maintaining where we're at, we're going to be continuing a more centered and adaptable program. So again, just really want to highlight, some of the concerns that we have here, looking at that transition from community-based to a more privatized base. Looking at this, there's higher administrative costs potentially that could come out of this. Private health plans, there was a study that came out, and these private health plans average about 15% overhead compared to just 2% for the current PIHP. So you're looking at the financial impact. That's a good figure to look at. Additionally, if this was to be switched over from the PIHPs, it could divert over $500 million annually from direct care to just administrative expenses. So again, this has the potential to reduce access and honestly worsen some of the service gaps that we have. So together, us, CMH, and other partners, we have wrote a letter to the governor expressing some of our concerns and asking for a more broad dialogue on this. Maybe, there are some places sure that we can work on, but let's have everybody at the table to have that conversation and, ensure that we have local control and local input on these issues. Because again, to divert from, a more community-based and adaptable system to a privatized one that would potentially be having decisions made way outside of our communities. We believe that, preserving these PIHPs is very important. So, we're going to be watching this. They haven't published anything since then. So, we're just making sure to let everybody know, this is our position, and reaching out to the governor's team and the rest of the executive office to see, what we can do to fix this issue.
Yeah, so we'll keep folks updated as things progress on that issue and see what develops here over the next few months. Deena, you had another bill that came up recently, I think just last week, that has to deal with drain assessment fees and how DNR handles them. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah. So Representative Schuette has House Bill 4118 that was taken up in committee and passed out of the House with huge bipartisan support. What the bill does is it says that the Department of Natural Resources, with all the land that they own, will now have to be part of the assessment rules for any drain projects. So if you think about it, counties pay drain assessments, residents pay drain assessments when they're doing projects, townships pay, Michigan Department of Transportation pays, your county road agencies pay, all for what they contribute to the water problem and managing it. So when you're going to go redo a drain, all of these entities are liable for picking up the cost for that, except for the Department of Natural Resources. So if you imagine, a drain project up north where the DNR owns the vast, huge swaths of land, those costs are being displaced upon every other entity, the residents, the municipalities, the road agencies. So this bill passed out of the House, huge bipartisan support, and we're hoping it gets some movement in the Senate because, let's face it, the state owns the land, they should have to also pay for managing it.
Yeah, another good bill there. Of course, though, from our discussion earlier, how many bills have been passed this session?
Oh, lots have passed. Just only 4 have gotten to the governor's desk.
Right.
4.
So, well,
Don't hold your breath. Is that what you're
Yeah.
telling me?
yeah,
Don't hold your breath.
I wouldn't hold your breath right now. 4 bills in 5 months. Some may look at that as good, some may look at that as bad. I guess it depends on your perspective, right? And then finally,
Doesn't bode well for the budget either. It makes me
no,
extremely
definitely
nervous.
does not. There's not a lot of bipartisanness going on right now. And then finally, I know last week, Friday of last week, an email went out this went to board chairs initially, county board chairs. The White House is again doing county days. They were called county days in the past, back in 2017 and 2019 when they were done under the Trump administration. And now they're calling them state leadership days. So the Michigan State Leadership Day is coming up to June 17th. So initially, the invite is only going out to board chairs. So if you did receive an email, you can respond to that. There's a lot of personal information they require if you are going to RSVP. So know that going into it, because there's security as you're being invited to the White House and going to have a debrief in the morning of the 17th, 9 to 1. We've been working with the White House, getting them contact information for folks. They have said that if the response rate is low enough for the initial invitation, it will go out to all county commissioners at some point. We are coordinating a dinner the night before the 16th with NACO, so board chairs be aware of that. I sent an email out to those to that effect on Monday. And then we're working on getting folks information for hotels. So if you have any further information, feel free to reach out to myself and we'll fill you in as much as we know. So with that, is there anything else anyone wants to pipe in on? All right. Well, good. We'll keep folks updated. Hope everyone has a good holiday weekend as we move into the summer months here finally. It doesn't feel like it outside today, but hopefully it warms up through the holiday weekend and we have a nice summer here, and we'll be back next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83.